How often do you do a full inspection of your Jeep before you hit the trail? Well, Regina and I are getting ready to head all the way to Moab. We're gonna wheel out there for a whole week and then drive all the way home. So I need to make sure her Jeep is good to go. And it's always good to have a second set of eyes to look over things just in case you miss something. And I've got somebody very special that's got a lot of experience that's gonna help us take a good look at her Jeep today. Stay tuned. Welcome to TrailRecon, I'm Brad, and today we're in the garage with my good friend Jerry from Shift Autowerx. Buddy, thank you so much for coming over.
It's so good to be back, Brad. Thank you.
I bribed him to come over and help me take a look at Regina's Jeep because I told him if he came over and went through a little inspection here, I'd take you out and go hit the trail and show you some of my favorite spots.
Yeah, so that actually made it for me. That was a perfect bribe.
But before that, dude, I want to take a deep dive into Regina's Jeep, make sure that this thing is really good to go. You know, I have a pretty good understanding of looking at things, but I know that there's a lot of things over the years. Being a certified Jeep mechanic for over 10 years, you got your own shop at Shift Autowerx. I mean, how many of these have you done, do you think?
Thousands.
Thousands.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty crazy stuff also.
Oh yeah, like what?
Like, for example, most common stuff would be like loose crown nuts, stuff that is just loose, like control arms or shocks. Most crazy stuff would be something like cracks on the differential or cracks on brackets that go directly to the frame or to the shocks that would make a lot of noise, but sometimes people still drive them like that and they don't really know what's going on until they bring it and get it inspected. So yeah, I've seen pretty crazy stuff over the years.
Well, let's hope we don't find any of that today. Hopefully everything's good. But as we go through it, I definitely want to talk about, you know, some of the things that maybe some of these guys should be really watching out for. So let me say we pop the hood and get started.
Absolutely, let's do it.
All right, man, before we start taking a deep dive into the engine bay, because we've already talked about a few things off camera, I'm like, I didn't know that. My wife's engine bay is a little dirty. I'd like to hear your theory. Is it okay to power wash this, or should you just wipe it down?
It's okay to power wash it as long as you're not pointing that gun directly at the electronic components, especially if you have like lights and a power switch and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You want to keep that water, you know, you can spray it a little bit, but don't point it directly at it because then you can damage the component. Just like the same thing with the alternator. Okay. You can get it wet, but don't point the water jet directly to it because then you can damage it.
Okay, well that's good to know. I mean, a lot of people ask that all the time, and typically I just usually wipe stuff down, but yeah, maybe I'll get the hose out next time.
Yeah, I used to wash them all the time. Like every time I used to do a big job, and still do, every time I do a big job that makes a mess inside the engine, I grab a power washer and just spray some degreaser everywhere and just clean everything out.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I think this one needs a little work, so.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about just some of the general basics, like fluids. What are the things to look for in the fluids before you roll out?
Low levels.
Yeah.
So if you have a coolant level like this one, and that's a little low, first thing you want to do is you want to pop that cap open because the cooling system is pressurized. So usually the vapor and pressure will accumulate at the top and then it'll push the level down a little bit. So when you open the cap, the level will rise a little bit. So if it's low, just add a little bit of coolant in there.
So the coolant in the Jeep is very specific, yes?
Yes. On this one specifically, it's 10-year coolant, which the color is purple.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't need to mess with it for 10 years, which is pretty awesome.
What else?
Oil level. If you have low oil level, make sure you don't have any leaks and the condition of it. If it's too black, you want to replace it. You don't want to go out on a trail with like very dirty oil.
Yeah.
Because you're exposing the engine extensive hours of operation and a lot of idling, and that flowing in there can potentially harm something.
So obviously we're slow rolling, idling a lot, and out in the dust and dirt.
Yeah.
We should be changing the oil more often than recommended.
Oh yes, absolutely. 10,000 miles is too much.
Okay.
For me, 10,000 miles is a lot.
Yeah.
I do it every 5,000 miles.
Okay, got it. Mm-hmm. Okay, what else for fluids?
Make sure you check your brake fluid. Make sure you check your washer fluid.
Washer fluid is, dude. For me, like I did that once, and we were in the mud, and I was out there pouring bottles of water off my window.
Yeah.
Don't forget, guys. Don't forget to fill up your windshield washer fluid before you leave. What else?
Power steering fluid. This one is very specific also.
Okay.
It's a green fluid. These have an electronic pump on the JLs. If you have a JK, it can be, I think, ATF +4. But on this one is a mineral-based oil, so it's the color of it is green. Make sure you have it at the proper level. Usually on the electronic power steering, it's low all the time. We don't know where it goes. We don't know where it goes. It's just low all the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Okay. What else for fluids?
Transmission, but the transmission on this one it's a sealed transmission. It's an 8-speed sealed transmission that also uses mineral oil.
Okay.
You're not going to be able to check that one. Chrysler made that oil so that it would last a very long time.
Okay.
You know, it can last up to 60, 70,000 miles.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I don't usually recommend you go that long without replacing it. Placing the oil on that one, I recommended it every 60,000 miles, and you have to replace the oil pan because the oil pan is the filter. Yeah.
So this Jeep is at 63,000 miles.
Oh,
so
there we go.
I guess we'll be bringing it over to the shop soon.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What else, like general stuff? Belts? You want to look at?
Yeah, you have to check the belts. For example, the alternator pulley has a clutch inside with grease. That clutch, it can leak, right? And it'll leave a trace of like grease over where it sits, it'll be just a straight line.
Okay.
If you see that line, then that clutch is more than likely the seal is worn or it needs to be replaced.
Okay.
If you don't replace it and you just keep driving it like that, what happens is it can seize completely and then you're done.
Yeah.
Like that alternator is not going to spin, you're not going to have a charging system. It's bad.
And this belt's pretty tight.
Yeah, the tensioners on these engines are really strong. It's like a mini shock, basically, and it's a really tough shock. These belts can take a lot of tension.
Okay. How often should I replace that belt?
Well, 60,000 miles.
So again, we got something else to do on this Jeep.
Yeah. If you idle it for extended periods of time, then you might want to do it like at 40,000 miles. But normal driving, city, highway, all that stuff, 60,000 is the recommended interval.
Okay. Air filter, definitely need to swap that out.
Yes, and make sure you put the OEM one. Don't put a K&N. Especially if you're going to be in the dust and you put something that is less restrictive, it can get in there.
Yeah.
If too much dust gets in there, then it ends up in the combustion chamber and it contaminates your oil and it makes it black.
Yeah.
It makes it darker.
I actually carry an extra air filter with me because we are 1, 2, 3 weeks out on the trail.
Yeah.
And you're following behind somebody in the desert for a long period of time. You can clog one of these up in just a single trip. And so I probably change my air filter every month or two. I don't wait until it's time to change the oil.
Nice.
So.
Yeah, usually every time I go on a trip or something like that, whenever I check the filter, it's just covered in dust.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, it's important.
All right. What else from a visual inspection should we be looking at?
So visually, coolant leaks, oil leaks, maybe you have a power steering leak. Sometimes the leaks are not visible. It's not actually dripping into the ground.
Okay.
What happens is you get, for example, the thermostat is on these and on the previous generation, the JK, it is common for that thermostat to crack, a very, very small crack, and that crack, coolant seeps through it and it dries and it creates like a little star, and it looks like pink crusted coolant around it.
Okay.
That's a leak, or that is about to become a big leak.
Okay.
So if you see that, you got to replace that component.
How do I visually see that? Is it hard to get to?
It's right here.
Okay.
On the JL, it's a little bit more difficult to see, but if you remove this piece right here, this air intake tube, you remove it out of the way, and the thermostat is literally down there.
Okay.
All you need is a flashlight. Point the flashlight at it. If you see crusted coolant in there, you got to get it replaced.
Okay. We know the famous oil cooler housing leaks. How do I know if that's got a problem? Because you're not going to see it up here, right?
Yeah, so it can vary. So the oil filter housing can leak either from the back or from the front. If it leaks from the front, you're going to see a big puddle of oil in the middle of the valley.
Okay.
If it leaks from the back, you're going to see a lot of oil dripping through the back transmission. Sometimes it goes all the way back to the transfer case and then it drips down over there.
Yeah.
And people think it's a transmission leak, but it's not. It's
I was that guy. It happened to me in Moab when my JK, when the oil cooler failed. It was leaking out the back, and I was like, "Where is this oil leak coming from?"
Yeah. So sometimes people will think that it's a transfer case leak or a transmission leak, and it's actually engine oil from the oil filter housing.
Okay.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting, man. There's plenty of things that you can check before you go on a trip on your engine.
Yeah.
But the main thing is just make sure that you don't have leaks.
Yeah. What about radiator hoses? Those need to be looked at too as well, right?
Yeah, inspect your hoses all the time. Give them a good squeeze. They got to feel squishy, but a little hard. They can't be too squishy because it means that something's wrong with them. Oil has been dripping on them or something like that. And they cannot be too hard. It means that they're going to crack at some point. So you want to make sure that they're a little squishy, especially the big ones that go to the radiator.
Okay.
Inspect all the other ones that go from the reservoir to the radiator, to the thermostat, to the heater core, all that stuff, and make sure you don't have leaks at any of these T's.
Yeah.
They're plastic and they can crack, especially if you've been working on the engine and you don't really pay attention where you position yourself or something like that. You can crack these, and you won't notice immediately sometimes. And then when you're driving it, it's gonna crust.
Okay.
So yeah, you got to check that. Also, the radiator, the end caps, they're plastic. The center of it is all aluminum. But end caps have a gasket. Sometimes that gasket fails and it starts to leak coolant right from there.
Oh, wow.
And it crusts on the bottom. You got to get underneath and then just find your radiator. If you see coolant on the edges, you got to replace the radiator.
Okay. Got it. How long you think a hose is good for? I mean, we're talking about not really mileage, but year-wise. Like, should I replace those every 5 years, 10 years?
Just to be safe, you do want to get them replaced every like 3 to 4 years. Tops.
Oh, okay. Dude, my list is getting longer. Yeah. Okay, electrical stuff. Corrosion on the batteries, and make sure that's clean.
Absolutely.
We've got some aftermarket lights, and so one thing I do is I always just kind of double check all my connections and make sure that there's no frayed wiring or nothing's rubbing on metal or anything else like that. Anything electrical that you can think of that we should be looking at?
As long as you have all your aftermarket components attached to the terminal properly, you don't really need to mess with it a lot.
Okay.
If you see a lot of corrosion and stuff like that, then just disconnect the battery, clean it as best you can, put a little bit of anti-corrosion lubricant on it, and then just put it back in there.
Okay.
There isn't really a lot of the problems with that if everything is connected properly.
Okay.
Like if you have a short, then every single light in there is gonna get triggered. Right. So yeah.
Okay. Anything else out of the engine bay?
No, that's pretty much it, man. Yeah, I think we covered almost everything.
All right, let's talk about underneath this big guy.
All right.
All right, where the rubber meets the road, probably one of the most important things to take a look at before you hit the trail. Let's just talk about tires. What are some of the things that we should be looking for?
Cracks.
Yeah.
On the tires, make sure you don't have any cracks. Usually weather cracks.
Okay.
Especially if the car sits for an extended period of time in the sun, you're gonna develop cracks all over the surface that is most exposed to the sun. Make sure you keep it at the proper air pressure level. Okay. If it's gonna sit for too long, you might wanna put a little bit more air on it so that the bottom that is touching the ground doesn't sink in.
Okay.
And it doesn't develop a flat spot.
Okay, that's good because not a lot of guys use their off-road vehicles as their daily drivers, so maybe they do sit a little bit. What about wear on the tread?
If you see uneven surfaces, it means you have a problem with the suspension.
Okay.
It could be worn shocks, worn bushings, worn ball joints, stuff like that, that would cause the tire to be bouncing excessively.
Okay. You can get wear, like uneven wear on one side versus the other, which could be like an alignment issue too, right?
Exactly. That could be an alignment issue. Usually, if toe is out, you will see wear on the inside of the tire. If the toe is facing in, you will see wear on the outside of the tire.
Okay. Good.
So yeah.
Obviously inspect your wheels, but there's usually not an issue. They're usually in pretty good condition. But I always check my the torque on my lug nuts. What's the torque spec for a JL?
130.
Okay.
Yeah, 130 foot-pounds is pretty good. If you do anything more than 135, you can crack the lug.
Okay.
So yeah.
The JL lugs are bigger than the JK lugs, right?
Yes.
I think the JK torque spec is a little lower.
Yeah, so the torque spec is about 100 foot-pounds for the JK.
Okay.
Yeah, even the lug nuts are completely different on that one and on this one. This one comes with 22 millimeter lug nut. That one comes with 19 millimeter lug nut. So this one is bigger, a lot tougher than on that one.
Okay. So we've jacked this up a little bit because we're going to test a couple things. What are we going to do?
We're going to check for play in the suspension on the ball joints and on the tie rods.
Okay, so how are we going to do that?
So the way you want to check that is by moving the tire. If you place your hand on the 12 o'clock and the bottom on the 6 o'clock,
okay,
and you rock it back and forth like this, You are basically checking play for the upper ball joint and the lower ball joint on the knuckle.
How do those feel?
These ones feel pretty good.
Okay.
Solid.
Okay.
You also check for play on the bearing by doing that.
Okay.
So when it moves, and sometimes some bearings are pretty bad, if it moves, take the tire off, and then you can move the bearing alone. I've seen some bearings that are worn pretty bad.
Okay.
So get it replaced.
The life of a bearing should last how long?
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends on the driving. Depends on the driver.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, and what else can we
So
test?
the other thing that you can test is play on the tie rod ends. The way you do that is you place your hand on 3 and 9.
Okay.
And you go back and forth like this, and it looks like you have play.
Uh-oh. Huh, I sure...
Yeah, you definitely have play in the tie rod, so there's more going on in there. We need to check it.
All right, well, we got to take the tire off to show these guys the suspension anyway, but now I guess we're taking a look closely at Regina's tie rod. That's a good thing we did this.
Yeah.
So I mentioned in the beginning of the video, it's good to have a second set of eyes, and I'm glad that we discovered that the tie rod's loose. You think we can just tighten this up?
Yes, absolutely. We can tighten that up to reduce the amount of play that you have.
Okay.
But more than likely, it will be worn.
All right, time for a new one altogether.
Exactly.
We did check that the ball joints are good to go.
Yeah.
But you were telling me something about the bolts.
Yeah, the bolts on the ball joints for the knuckle, the crown nuts get loose, especially on these ones with aluminum knuckles.
Okay.
They loosen up all the time, and they make a clicking sound. So you got to remove the cotter pin.
Okay.
And retighten those.
Okay. Pretty easy to do for the average guy.
Pretty easy to do. Just those ones you got to get them tight.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about steering components. What are some of the important things to look at when you're doing a visual inspection?
Torn tie rod boot covers, ball joint covers, bushings on the control arms, basically any sort of torn bushing in there that it has exposed grease.
Okay.
Especially if you've been wheeling and it's been torn for a while, you have dirt in there.
Yeah.
So it can have play potentially.
Okay. Drag link as well.
Drag link as well.
And this one, so we have an aftermarket one, so we can actually lube these. If I'm correct, the standard ones they're not greasable. Correct?
They're not greasable. They're sealed. Usually some aftermarket ones, they are greasable. Just use regular ball joint grease or bearing grease.
Okay. And the drag link, you got to give that a good shake too, because those ends could be loose as well, right?
Exactly.
We discovered that on my JK not too long ago, so I was glad that you found that. All right, what about on the axle housing? Is there anything there that we should be visually inspecting?
Yeah, you can check the axle seals. Front differentials are on the inside.
Okay.
If you have a leak, the leak will be on the outside of the shaft over here on the bottom.
Okay.
You should get it fixed, right? But it's not...
shouldn't let it go for like 3 or 4 months like someone did once upon a time?
Yeah, no, you shouldn't let it go for that long.
Okay.
You can drive it. If you get it on the trail or something, you can get out of there safely, no problem. But you do have to get it fixed because you could potentially damage the inside of that differential if you don't have enough fluid in there.
Okay, and what about the differential fluid? We need to check that level, right?
Yeah, check the level, check for the condition of it too. Like if it's got excessive like metal or stuff like that, or if it's very flaky or shiny, then you got to get it replaced. Okay. Because I have seen some Jeeps that have, I don't know, 30, 40,000 miles since the last exchange, and the fluid is basically brand new, especially in the front one. The back one is usually going to be really dirty because it's constantly pushing the vehicle, but the front one is just spinning in there freely, so it doesn't create a lot of friction all the time. So if it's flaky, you got to get it replaced.
Okay. Now there's a lot of brackets on the axle housing. What are some things commonly seen being a problem with those?
You have to check for cracks.
Okay.
If you wheel it a lot, especially, those welds can crack, and then they'll create a loud clicking noise or cracking when you're driving.
Which ones are most common that you've seen?
The shock bracket on the axle housing, that weld crack. And I mean, it's not a problem to fix it. All you got to do is clean it up real good, get it welded again, you're good to go.
Yeah, well, I can tell you we've broken a lot of track bar brackets out on the trails, JK specifically. I think they've been reinforced on the JL, but we've had that be a problem quite a bit. Control arm brackets also?
Control arm brackets on the JL are a lot more sturdy than they are on the JK.
Okay.
Jeep made sure of that because they knew that these vehicles were going to get off-roaded quite often, and you know, they're going to be exposed to a lot of the rocks and stuff like that. So they made sure that those brackets were welded on properly.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about control arms? What should we be looking at on control arms?
Bushings on the control arms, they have play sometimes. If you have aftermarket control arms in there, some of them are adjustable, right? And they have a humongous nut to adjust that Johnny joint sometimes. Make sure that that nut is tight, because if it's not tight, it creates excessive play. That's pretty much it, man. Yeah, it's pretty basic. You get down there, you use a pry bar, wedge it in between the axle and the control arm, and just move it back and forth.
Okay.
If you see excessive play on the control arm, there's something wrong in there. Then you need to get it checked. If you don't see excessive play, the bushing is still good, you're good to go.
Okay. All right, now what about shocks? What should we be looking for with the shock?
So leaks on the bottom of the shaft on the bracket where it bolts on.
Okay.
If you see that it's wet, the oil is coming from the seal of the shock, which most often than not, at that point you got to replace the shock. It becomes too soft once it starts losing pressure. Some shocks, higher end shocks, you can get them rebuilt. Most often than not, you got to replace them. If you have, now lengthwise of the shock, if you have one of those higher end shocks, it can last you a really, really long time.
Okay.
If you have a budget shock, you're gonna have to get it replaced more often.
Yeah, I mean, even some manufacturers will say that the shocks after 30,000 or 40,000 miles need to be rebuilt. But yeah, if you have a lower end shock, you might be replacing that after 20,000 miles if you off-road it hard, right? Is that fair to say? So you kind of get what you pay for sometimes in a shock.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brakes and brake pads. What should we be looking for in a visual inspection?
Visual inspection. Heat cracks on the rotors.
Yep.
So when you have a heavy foot, like me,
and Regina,
you end up heating the rotor excessively, creating heat cracks.
Right.
And what that does, it also damages the brake pad.
Okay.
Now, the JLs come with really, really good brake pads. They last 100,000 miles. It's not a guarantee, but that's what they say. They can last up to 100,000 miles. So as long as the thickness is good of it and you don't have any heat cracks, you have nothing to worry about.
So we're at 63,000 miles and they're starting to squeak. And the squeak means what specifically?
Squeak means crystallization. Yeah, crystallization happens with moisture. It collects on the rotor and it creates a little bit of rust. And then once you start rolling, that rust is collected by the brake pad, turns it into a crystal. And then usually happens in the morning, starts to squeal a little bit. Once it gets hot, it kind of goes away. So yeah, that's what happens. But if you do that, the way to fix it, you can remove the brake pads, sand them down really good with sandpaper, sand the rotor a little bit, and then put them back in, and you should be good to go.
Oh, that's a great tip. What grit sandpaper would you use? Just real mild?
No, use a tough one.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, use a tough one. Use like a 80.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Sway bar? Anything to think about on the sway bar?
Just check the bushings on the sway bar.
Okay.
And usually on these bushings, when they go bad, they squeal a lot. They squeal excessively, and it's very, very loud. Okay. So if you're not getting a squeal and you're not having torn boot covers on your sway bar links, you should be good to go.
One other thing we didn't talk about is the FAD, the front axle disconnect. And I remember when the JL first hit the market, man, all the purists were upset that it has a FAD. But now, fast forward several years, what's your thoughts on the FAD? Is there problems with it?
Yeah,
oh, really?
It cracks.
Okay.
For example, I don't feel confident that I'm not going to have a problem with it if I wheel it too hard. Okay. You know what I mean? Because I've seen them crack exactly at the FAD. Okay. So the way to avoid that, you put a truss system on your axle, but it can be pricey.
Okay. So is it something you can see on the outside, or do you need to actually break it open to see the crack?
You can see it on the outside, but usually when that fails, it's a catastrophic failure. Like there is no way to miss it. It's just going to go completely done. It's going to break. Okay. Yeah.
Got it. All right. Anything else we should talk about here? Suspension and brakes and tires. I think we covered a lot.
Yeah. Not that I can think of. Like I said, it's all just rubber in here. Yeah. They got an insulator over there. Make sure it's in good shape. Just with a flashlight. Point it up there. Make sure it's good. Your bump stop. Make sure it's good. That's pretty much it, man.
All right. We still got more to talk about.
Yeah.
Buddy, I love all the knowledge that's just coming out, man. This is such good information. You did mention there was one other thing under there that we should have talked about behind the wheel. What was that?
The ABS sensors.
Okay.
So the position of the ABS sensor wiring is not ideal. Okay. So sometimes with all the stretching and flexing and all that stuff, that cable can stretch and it breaks the wiring inside of it, and then you get an ABS light.
Okay.
So make sure that you have the proper length. If you have a lifted Jeep, make sure you extend it down a little bit or buy an extension for it and place it properly and securely, because you don't want that thing flapping around all over the place.
Same with brake lines too. You want to do visual inspection on those guys
Exactly.
as well. Make sure that they're long enough.
Yeah,
well.
you don't want to have a brake line failure out there. On
Yeah,
the
no,
trail.
that's not good.
Especially going downhill.
Yeah.
It can be dangerous.
Could be a problem. Okay, underneath the Jeep, what are some things we should be looking at?
The drive shafts have boots, especially on these ones. If you don't have an aftermarket drive shaft, they have it's like a CV type boot, and it's rubber, and that thing cracks all the time, rips, leaks all the grease. Then it starts to make a noise after a while. So what you want to do, you want to get down there, and the front drive shaft is a little hard to see sometimes, especially if you have skid plates and stuff like that. Just grab a flashlight. If you see grease splattered all over the place, you have a torn boot in there.
And if you have an aftermarket drive shaft that has U-joints, you need to give those a good inspection as well.
Yes, give them a good inspection. And if you haven't greased them, just put a little bit of grease in there. Don't over grease them, because then you rip the seal out.
Okay.
So you just want to put a little bit of grease if you have not greased them in a while.
Okay. Underneath the Jeep, otherwise, everything's pretty good, right? Checking hoses and wires.
Yeah, I would check, now that you mentioned wires, I would check if you have lockers, check the connectors for the lockers, because that wiring also stretches, and if it stretches too much, it can break the connector. We've covered almost everything underneath the Jeep.
Okay. Moving to the rear, there's not a lot to talk about, but I'm curious, are you a proponent of a 4-tire or 5-tire rotation?
5-tire rotation.
Really?
Because what happens if it sits out here for too long, it develops cracks, weather cracks and stuff like that, and then the rubber becomes a little stiff. And even if you get new tires and you get a flat on the new one and you want to use this one, it's going to ride completely different. So I suggest you do a 5-tire rotation every time you get a rotate.
And I think something else that folks don't think about is, people like to lift their Jeeps, put bigger tires on them. One thing you need to make sure is, one, your jack works and you have everything, but if you need to maybe even have a jack stand or a bottle jack, and so it's a good thing to make sure all that's in good working order as well.
Exactly. And if you have a lifted Jeep, sometimes, for example, I'm running 40s, my stock jack, which I still have, and it's the one that I use, make sure you have an extender or something to put underneath that raises that jack so that you can get the tire off of the road.
I have I think the AV base plate. They make a pretty good one that works well. So cool. All right, just a couple more things to talk about, dude. I'm not done picking your brain yet.
All right.
A few more things that I think are important to check before you head out. If you have a winch, you should definitely make sure it's functional. I mean, look, winches sit for a long time most of the time. You want to make sure your controller is working. It's in a place that's accessible. Like sometimes you clean out your vehicle and you're like, what do I do with that controller?
Exactly.
The winch line.
Yes. Make sure that it's in good condition.
Yeah.
Because sometimes winches are exposed to the sun for extended periods of time, and it can be, brittle or burnt by the sun.
Yeah, and it's a good idea even to pull that winch line out like once or twice a year and just let it come all the way out, clean it. So if you haven't done that, it's a good idea to do that. If you have any off-road lights, just check them, make sure they're in working order.
Yeah, make sure every single button inside of the Jeep works. Like if you want to activate your lockers, you can go ahead and do that. You could even put it on 4-wheel drive, even if it's on pavement. Just don't drive for an extended length. Put it on 4-wheel drive and then activate those lockers. Make sure that they work and then they are functional. You should see, if you have a JL, you should see on the dash that they are active, and then deactivate them and make sure that they go through the cycle of deactivation. It should flash a couple times.
And this is important because, let's be honest, there's a known problem with the lockers on the JL, right?
Yeah.
The sensor goes bad.
Yes.
Yeah, it's happened to me.
I know. You were out there on the trail and it failed on you. It can be pretty frustrating sometimes. So make sure that it works. Make sure it cycles through the whole thing, the whole process before you go, obviously. Yeah, you don't want to have they don't want to have the same problem you had.
No. It was forcing me to drive a little more aggressive than I'd like, but I got it fixed. So.
Well, that's what you got. People that don't have lockers, they have to do that all the time.
You got to throttle out. Well, buddy, look, some of this was, some basic knowledge for a lot of folks, but I got a couple of great pieces of intel out of this. Plus, for now, we know we need to tighten up a few things. So before we leave for Moab, we're going to be getting under there with a wrench and checking all those control arm bolts and everything. But man, thanks for coming by, helping us go through this. I really appreciate it. I'm ready to go hit the trail if you are.
Let's go.
Okay,
I'm
guys.
ready.
Thanks for watching. If you are in Southern California and you need some work done, check out Jerry and his team over at Shift Autowerx. And if you are visiting this channel for the first time, hit that subscribe button because we'll probably do this again. What do you say?
Absolutely.
Sounds good. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next video.